it's kind of a thing when you're doing the alphabet in English and you come to the middle and it's like LMN, except we've had T, so it's LMNT, so it's elements.
I think it's the anthology of visual poetry from the last 65 years without repeating any reprints from any other anthology that we know of.
Also, we tried to do something rather unusual in that there's no attribution on any of the pages, so that it just reads as a flow, which surprised us because we didn't really know how to organize it at first. And we decided, okay, let's try alphabetically. And it was like magic.
It became the obvious method to go, even though it was like literally the first method that we tried. But it was like, this really works.
But also, this is the actual book, and it's so flexible.
Oh, almost all the material is unknown. I mean, even if when it was all published, but it was in like editions of 100 at the most, maybe a couple more in some cases, but the majority is, yeah, usually it's very small editions. So it's really a ground, I don't want to say underground because that's so annoying, but it's um of ground, I think, in its breadth of work.
And we love the back cover, which John and Hart did an awful lot of work on to make it so interesting and intricate.
So that's 125 works by 80 Canadian artists, right?
You would think it would have been difficult to arrive at a consensus between four people, but and I think we all have very different proclivities in what we enjoy, but we did have a kind of we had parameters that we worked within that sort of defined it and helped do the job for us in a way. Not that I could really define those parameters, but trying to both show what individual people's standard modes of working were, but also showing things that were very outside their usual modes of working. So it wasn't really too difficult to narrow things down, even when there were, say with people like Gustave Morin, there were like 30 pieces to choose from or something like that. It wasn't too hard to narrow it down.
I don't know. I think there were moments.
Well, it's also a way of linking concrete work with oral presentation in an experimental way or in a musical way, because they're both extra linear.
The conceptual strictures that concrete poetry, the terms concrete poetry, visual poetry, sound poetry have, and it just kind of covers them all, right?
Yeah, and we want to avoid experimental.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
And avant-garde.
Visual poetry or extra linear work, we're talking really small footprint. So, just because you have like a square, whatever it is, square peg or whatever site, it doesn't mean anything.
I find it quite disturbing for a number of reasons. It has become so ephemeral. That's the most disturbing fact. I mean, life has become extremely ephemeral. Attention spans have become like nanoseconds. I don't know. So for all the good of the spread of the word, so to speak, the negative impacts are just tremendous. I remember when I had a little company called Noir Z. Daniel was part of it at one point. And we found that when we published a person, people would come to the site only for that person and not look at anything else. It wasn't like a mortar bookstore where you could go in and pick something off a shelf. It's just too ephemeral.
I haven't found the internet to be all that helpful. both in terms of research and in terms of showing stuff, selling it. I mean, I post stuff constantly, but it's not as though it really gets that much action. And yeah, in trying to look stuff up, I found more often than not that if I have something specific I'm trying to find, the odds are that I won't be able to find it.
But also, it's incredibly personal. It's like the way people use their phones. They look up their own work or their own friends' work and then go away. It's called browsing, but they don't.
Anthologies like this do a great job of scooping up 120 pieces and throwing them down. And like these pieces are more or less okay for a while, at least 50 years, we'll say, maybe. But though I just want to say one thing, sorry. You just have to be careful when you have people making anthologies because they're sculpting history. And as the preceding anthologies in Canada have shown, there's a certain amount of skullduggery going on in these things where things become far more important than they should be. And I think that happens in all this kind of preserving. When people start preserving things, it gets kind of like just some things deserve to be thrown in the garbage. So
I make a very good point. Let me interrupt, because one thing we didn't do was have an agenda on this one. We came with a completely open mind to where the art we wanted and the art we liked. And that was the beginning and end of it. There was no political agenda, no gender agenda, no woke agenda, or nothing agenda. And I think that's one thing that does set this one apart from pretty much all the other anthologies that I can think of, except the earliest, perhaps.
Yeah. I think that was emphasized by not putting any attribution on the page. Each of the 120 pieces only has that piece, and the reader or the viewer experiences that page without any idea originally. Our hope was anyway, without thinking of who this is coming from and, whoa, I should appreciate it because it's so and so.
well, despite what has been said about different taste, there's also a common area in what we like, and I think that came through.
Well, also in the early days, in the 60s, a lot was government supported. I mean, the Canada Council did offer grants to concrete poets and visual poets, language art. I mean, it was really hot then. And then I guess some of that just sort of was left over.
Well, no, yeah, it became the heritage too.
Maybe Canada's a young, this sounds ridiculous, but maybe Canada's a young enough country and still in exploratory mode.
I was going to say, they used to
And
say that American avant-garde writers write fiction or prose, and Canadian avant-garde writers write poetry. And I see concrete and visual as an extreme kind of poetry. And the thing about fiction is it relates to an audience. And a lot of Canadian writers are used to having no audience whatsoever. So we write in the void, and that encourages concrete and visual poetry without worrying about whether it's going to be appreciated.
good answer. Good answer.
I don't want to overstate this, but would the effect of BP and his work, which made visual poetry fun and not dreary,
Yeah, the
uh,
European stuff was serious.
yeah, and people looked at it and went like, "Oh, I can do that."
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, to a degree, maybe.
Yeah, well, he was a big influence, though.
He was an ambassador.
Who knows? I don't know. I don't know. It's bizarre. It is strange because yeah, if you look at other countries, they seem to have a lot, but that's only because you're like adding them up over time. But here, even in Toronto in the 80s, right? It was like a mecca Yeah, I can't really imagine. Maybe just
That's Canada.